All right, so it turns out I was just skipping a singular step when I was doing my exporting from my 3D Revit file to my AutoCAD file. Um, One thing is, though, this is doing an export from Revit to laser cut from that AutoCAD file is going to create quite a few different AutoCAD drawings. So what I would recommend doing is making a folder somewhere like on your desktop. So I'm just going to call this one Eames laser export. That way I can just kind of have everything in one little place. And then I have here my Eames building that I was showing in class, and I kept running into that little problem, but it's a pretty easy fix. Um, you could do this from things like your elevation views too if you want. I'm just going to do it from my three-dimensional view. And the first thing I'm going to do is duplicate this 3D view here that I have, and then I'm going to rename this one um, East, East Export. That way I could just know what each of them are. You don't have to rename your views while you do this, but it's just going to be a little bit helpful to, know which ones you're looking at. Then I'm going to click on this curtain wall here because this is the one I want to export. And I'll go to my glasses here, and I'm going to say that I want to isolate this wall or isolate this element. And then I'll click on my glasses again and I'll say apply that to view. And then I'm just going to look on it head on from the front. So that again is just isolating it so it's just this curtain wall with its various contributors to it. The next thing I want to do then is convert this into 2D line work, which would be pretty much putting it on paper space. For those of you who have used software like Fusion, Inventor, or SolidWorks, we have our three-dimensional objects, and then we can make those two-dimensional paper orthographics from them. The same sort of concept applies when we're placing views on sheets in Revit. So I'm going to come down here to my sheets, and I'm going to right-click on sheets and say I want to make a new one. For my title block, I'm actually going to say none because the title block is going to bring in a bunch of annoying line work that I'll have to delete anyway. So I'm just going to say don't put a title block on there. And that is just going to create this new sheet down here, which really has nothing to it. So it just put me in a blank abyss. And then I'm going to just drag and drop my East export into this view. And then I believe I'm going to test this theory out live with you guys, so let's hope it works. If I set my view here to 1/4 inch equals a foot, I'm curious to see if when I export it to AutoCAD, if it's going to export as 1/4 inch equals a foot, or if it's going to export as full size. So we're going to test this theory out together. But I just have here the view now, two-dimensional on paper space, and now I'm ready to go File, Export, CAD Format, DWG. It's only going to export this sheet, so I'll click on Next, and then when my little pop-up comes asking where do I want to put it, I'm going to put it in this Eames export folder so that this way, as I export every wall, I kind of have them organized a little bit. So I'll click on OK. Depending on how complicated your wall is or how much is going on in your view, this export might take a while. It may have quite a lot of line work that it's going to be exporting. But, hi Millhouse. We'll go into here, and then here's my Eames export folder, and we can see that just from this one wall alone, it made I can't count, 3 different views, and I am 95% sure this is the one I want, but I could be wrong. So I'm going to double click on it to open it up, and yes, this is the view that I wanted to work with, but it's still not necessarily ready to go into the laser, because what this actually is just a series of blocks. So I have my properties bar here, and it's telling me that this is a block reference. If you don't have your properties bar up, all you have to do is just type in the word prop, enter, and usually when you open it for the first time, it'll be like floating here on your screen. You can just click and drag that, and I like to always have it locked in on the side. The first thing I'm going to do with this in order to get it prepped for the laser is I'm just going to highlight everything, and I see here that I have 497 blocks, and I'm going to explode them. So I just highlighted everything, keyboard shortcut X, enter, and then what this has done is it switched it into series of lines, and if I hit escape and click on this one, series of hatches. So my next step is I want to remove all of these hatches. Easiest way to go about doing that is to use my quick select tool. And when this pops up, I'm just going to say that I want the object types of hatches. And for my operator, I'm just going to ask it to select all of my hatches and click OK. That then selected the 497 hatches that exist in this drawing. And I'm just going to hit the delete key on my keyboard to get rid of those. And now this is only line work. My next problem is kind of twofold. One of them is that it's now just a series of all of these tiny line segments. So when I put it on the laser, it's going to cut this out as a separate piece from this one and a separate piece of this one. And I really wanted just to put this whole mullion facade as one piece to cut out, because otherwise this would be an absolute nightmare to assemble. And it is just going to look better if it's all one thing. There's also quite a few line overlaps that are probably happening. So like here, if I clicked on that line and I delete it, there was this line then hiding behind it. Down here, there's also a series of lines that are overlapping, which is just going to be potentially an issue on the laser and also just a real pain in the butt to trim. So what I'm going to do again is highlight my entire drawing. And this time I'm going to use the command overkill, enter. And when this window pops up here, I'm going to have it just take into consideration, like no matter what, because all of these are in the same layer, they're all the same color, they're all the same line type, so I don't need to ignore anything. And I'm just going to say, okay. And I can see down here that out of the 1,550 pieces I had, 732 overlaps were deleted. So that's just going to make trimming this a little bit easier when I go working through the whole thing. So my next step then to prep this for the laser would be to use the trim command, TR, and then I can just drag myself like through this whole bit, and I can just make it so that's all one piece. It did a little extra trim here, which is kind of a bummer. So let me just get rid of that bit. Sometimes when things are off screen with trim, AutoCAD does some filling in the blanks that we'd rather it not fill in. So yeah, now it would be just me going through, trimming these lines. One way I can check at the very end if this is going to laser cut all as one piece the way I want to would be to use the hatch tool. And I can just do a solid hatch and just have it fill the area. And so then I can see that all of those pieces at the moment are connected to each other. If the whole facade or the whole mullion group filled in, then that means I had done all of my trimming and then I'm good to go. So I still have quite a ways to trim, but a little easier than setting all of this up on my own. Last thing I want to check then is if this exported at 1/4 inch equals a foot, because that would be really cool. So I'm going to just do a linear dimension from here to here. And it looks like this, so yeah, it's 8 foot 3.5 inches. So it did not export to scale, but that would then be just using the scale tool, which I can show quickly again here, of highlight the wall. Scale is keyboard shortcut SC, enter. Base point's not going to matter. I'll click somewhere, and then I'm going to use a reference scale. So I'm going to type R, enter. For the length that I know is going to be 12 inches or 1 foot, and the amount I want it to become is 0.25 or 1/4 of an inch. So 12 inches to 1/4 of an inch. I'll just double click my scroll wheel to zoom in here, and we can see now that this window pane, or this little facade piece actually, because this is a solid piece, not a window, is now 2 inches and 1/16. So it's been scaled down to be 1/4 inch equals a foot in scale. I would have to run through this export process for every single wall. But again, if you have your Revit file and you want to put it into the laser, this is kind of one way that you could potentially expedite that process.